Okay, YouTubers, here's a continuing deconstruction of Ira Einhorn's ideas. He talks about people cooperating with each other to help each other realize their various potential and become some new type of human being to, survive the age of Aquarius or enter the age of Aquarius. The transmuted understands this process and all its ramifications, so presumably you're not going to understand what you're doing until you're already transmuted. That doesn't make sense, does it? And then he talks this fancy stuff, to be aware of self and other as a continuous process. When others' awareness slips, it is the duty of the other to prod, to shock, or to do whatever necessary to awaken the sleeper. That sounds a bit like Gurdjieff concepts to some extent. Yeah, here we go. To enter a new concept of human nature, the basic need of now, a transformation of human nature that will allow us to survive and enter the age of Aquarius with a re/nude project for man on Earth. Bear in mind that only some people get to be on Earth. The hoi polloi who get to realize themselves and work together and fulfill all each other's material needs and be the infrastructure and logistic support for the leptoids. So basically, they are a new working class under a new ruling class. Let's see. As transformed consciousness implies the creation of a well-being stimulant. Stimung, some neologism of his, a harmony, which allows for the extension of new thought into realms previously unexplored by the conceptual and intense probing of the human species. The stasis implied by most faddist salvationist philosophies now sweeping the global village, particularly in the most advanced electronic countries. Bear in mind this was the 1970s, 1972. Is a denial of evolution that must be closely analyzed, for it is a symptom of spiritual despair similar to the more material manifestation in the neo-Luddite destruction of computers. The Est is able to see through the mode of material scarcity which had previously controlled all the men did on planet Earth. Obviously, this guy was a real Est head at some point while he was writing this. Chapter 4, Transmutation. Creation of a new consciousness and step down. The decades I was talking about this new consciousness. Basically, all they're doing is creating misfires and what do you call those things where there's a wires short out on each other, the equivalent in the brain, with or without the help of drugs. It's not people like that that actually make things work. And then he goes on to say this. The leptoid is that being who is able to live totally from essence. I covered that before. A realized being whose individuality is fully developed. To be like him or her should not be our goal. I don't know what he means by our, who he's talking down to the others and make him feel like he identifies with them, or if he actually is thinking in terms of being something superior to himself. Considering he's a narcissistic psychopath, I kind of doubt the latter. It is not the content of the path that should be followed, but rather the sense that each of us must fully develop what we are. The content of the path. In other words, it don't matter what you're thinking about, what you believe, whatever. It's just as long as you're doing something, you're pursuing a path. Well, that's pretty damn ridiculous. This work can only be carried on by a group of conscious beings whose goal is objectively stated and whose energy is continually directed toward keeping each other awake. The leptoid has transcended the material conditions and economic, etc., etc. I covered that. So he got on the subject of sleepwalkers having to awake from this, I don't know, automated condition we supposedly are in. And he blithers on and on. Makes some comparisons to processes in the physical body, disease and not disease. Short-circuited schizophrenics produce less ATP. Yeah, well, whatever. Cancer, the plague of our time. Cancer is indicative of the fact that the body's has reached a somatic terminus. So, in other words, I don't know, he's, I'm sure he's trying to say that the reason we have such disease problems and cancer is because we aren't conscious enough, or he's just drawing comparisons between the physical diseases and mental ones. The soma has reached the end of its evolutionary development. That's physical body. All further somatic development will be involutionary, loss of hair, tonsils, adenoids, appendix, or involve the creation of a man-machine linkage. And there's that transhumanism. Now, transhumanism and a whole bunch of stuff that included the computer age and everything does have its origins in some interesting get-togethers and thinking going on in the 1950s and 60s. This guy did not really invent anything. He takes a bunch of ideas, slings them together, and runs with them. Now, in a certain sense, that's what anybody does. As somebody once put it, if we see forests, because we stand on the shoulders of giants. On the other hand, you might be standing on the shoulders of insane giants and seeing in the wrong direction. Whatever. It's interesting that he says that this somatic development, that's physical, would seem to be in the direction of a rather increasing loss. Almost like you're going to move in the direction of some, one of those grayskin type things or something, I don't know. Of the creation of a man-machine linkage, the body has reached a somatic terminus, and cancer is the gatekeeper of transformation. A strong message that we must heed. The being is struggling to extend itself in new ways. Those new ways must be psychic. The old self must be transcended. The psychic counterpart of somatic auto-amputation, the extension, new limb that is needed is a new self, capital S, the forms of which have been described in the chapter on transformation and transmutation. A new way of being requires a new environs, a new energetics, combining the total nonsense. Well, it sounds like he's implying that outbreaks of insanity or cancer mean we have reached a terminus in our evolution. Notice how evolution is a major player in the underpinnings of some of these now lumpable together as New Age ideas, New Thought, even to some extent hinted at, I suppose, certainly in modern alchemic stuff, and explicitly in some cases, particularly when the Nazis would aim to consciously direct evolution to produce a Superman, and anybody else pulling similar notions. But evolution, well, there's two things about it. First off, it's based on some things that are highly questionable. Many scientists have rejected the Darwinian form and opted for other versions than this creationist camp. And the fact is that there are severe problems with this radiometric dating. For example, you take two systems, two radiometric systems, A and B, okay? You apply them to the same sample. You apply them to several samples. System A will be consistent within itself for dating for its type of isotope it's looking for. And system B will be consistent in itself. So they all produce variations, and the scientists throw out the extremes and settle for the middle. But you apply these two different systems looking for different isotopes to the same materials over and over, they radically disagree. Polonium isotope halos have been found in granite of a sort which the type of polonium, the isotope that is not going to last for more than something like, I can't remember, it's 30 seconds or 2 minutes, but whatever the point is that this shows that the granite it was in and the polonium itself came into existence and solidified into its present form in a matter of something like 30 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever that was. Okay, now that kind of fits creationist picture a whole lot better. And as Father Seraphim Rose pointed out, in I believe it's something like Genesis, Creation, and Early Man, or Creation, Genesis, and Early Man, you cannot apply the standards, the natural laws to the process of creation. You can't say, well, like with the Big Bang, because of this and that and other characteristics of physics, it's going to do this and that during the Big Bang and after, for a little while before it stabilizes out. You can't say this regarding creation. You can't look at the Genesis account and say, well, this and that and the other because of laws of physics, because those laws were coming, they didn't exist, okay? They were coming into existence at the same time. They were part of creation, okay? So you can't use them to test the validity of the Genesis account because they were not in play. They hadn't been finalized. They hadn't been, they were in the process of being created themselves. So they were not stable. Everything doesn't become stable until the last point where it says that God rested on the seventh day. So, he also says that somewhere in the Torah, it mentions that observing the Sabbath would be a sign of the covenant. And all these signs of the covenant are done away with now that Jesus has come. So Sabbath keeping is out. And Sunday wasn't supposed to be a Sabbath. It was a celebration of the resurrection of Christ, a mini Easter or Pascha each week, because that's the day he rose on, the Lord's Day. Is why it's called that, because Jesus the Lord rose on that day. So you have all this evolutionary stuff. And then he talks about planetary metabolism, a metabolism that will constantly re/cycle all our biomass and idiomass, that's like ideas and stuff, until a harmonic steady state is reached that will allow for the maximum potential realization of every being on the planet. He emphasizes that one. You know, it's bigger words, bigger letters. Everything's written in caps anyway. Childhood's End, underscore those two. That's the title of a book by Clark. Will then occur, and the forms of our new being will flow outward with, like a crossword puzzle. Out is coming down off a flow, and then ward into the cosmos. Childhood's End. Arthur C. Clarke shows this spaceship land, and these critters come out, supposedly our new teachers and so forth, who look very much like the devil from medieval art. And that in itself cued me there's something seriously wrong. And as I recall, I wasn't even a serious Christian at that point, but I knew something about right and wrong, good and evil, demons versus angels, and a general overall picture of something's not right, okay? Well, we got maps of consciousness in chapter 6. Slithering about pulsars and quasars. Planetary man. You know, the vast majority of humanity, they love to blither about, doesn't even know these people exist and doesn't give a damn, and it's not, and is, you know, even those that are in relative plenty, whether there's a famine going on or something, and comparatively comfortable, this guy's crap, and anything similar has no bearing on their well-being, except insofar as it could fuel behaviors of others that might disrupt their well-being. So, I mean, all this, it's interesting. He talks about, you know, the material things are solved, then you work on this spiritual, psychological stuff. He's drawing on Viktor Frankl there. There's this hierarchy of needs, and you don't get around the spiritual until your physical is met. Well, if you're not very spiritually oriented, if you're not oriented around integrity, around God, around either, he was Jewish, either orientation to Yahweh and his revelation and the Torah and keeping it in order to be on track with him, or orientation to Jesus. If you're not one of these two things, then yeah, your material needs are going to have to be met before you consider anything about moral, spirituality, psychological development, or growing up, or beyond what it takes to get food on the table. And this